Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning if some of you folks are out west. My name is Maxime Simard, and I'm thrilled to be here today with you to discuss a question that sits in the back of the mind of many lawyers, namely, what would life be like if you work as an in-house counsel? So this webcast is an idea of Megan and I, and it is presented by Thomson Reuters Practical Law. So as many of you should know or already know, TR is a content-based legal information and solutions provider. Canada is our home base. That's where we have our head office, and we're here today to bring industry insights to those who matter the most to us, you, our customers. And what about Practical Law Canada? Practical Law Canada offers a wide range of up-to-date resources that go beyond and complement primary case law and research by really providing what we call legal know-how. So thanks to PL Canada for sponsoring this event. And I trust everyone received the practical tips documents that were sent earlier today. If not, just write to me, and I will send it to you right after our webinar today. So before anything, here's a disclaimer. Despite their many differences, when we're talking about private and in-house practice, we have to know that they also share many similarities in key areas. So both law firm lawyers and in-house counsel, there's no question about it. They have highly demanding workloads and face substantial work pressures. So this is not a conversation about who's better at lawyering or who's more performant. What today is, though, is really a conversation on preparedness, on strategies and tips to help lawyers transition to in-house practice. And we should add, definitely applies to those of you with prior in-house experience who are transitioning to a new company. So we all know, like, lawyers go in-house for a variety of reasons, ranging from the appeal of a better work-life balance to fatigue with having to build time, develop business, could be an interest in a specific industry, a desire to delve into the business and focus on one client. In addition to these changes, counsel should be prepared to adjust to many other key differences between law firm and in-house practice, and that's what we'll explore with Megan. So many questions are already coming to mind, and the temptation to dive right in and ask them all to our expert on the call, Megan Hill, is there. So for those who don't know her, Megan did it all, pretty much. I'm talking about working in all the segments of the legal industry. So she's currently a senior lawyer editor in-house for Practical Law Canada. But previously, Megan was a director, corporate counsel for Starbucks Coffee Canada, where she handled a wide range of corporate and commercial matters. And prior to Starbucks, Megan was a senior counsel for Reuters Communications, advising on general corporate matter, including franchise and distribution. And then prior to Reuters Communication, Megan started really her career at Osler, Hoskin and Harcourt LLP as an associate in the franchise and distribution group. So, but before we get Megan to share a great experience with us and her tips, as a conversation starter, let's get a statistical perspective on the state of the workforce in the legal industry and explore the numbers that really shape this. So let's start by dealing with the elephant in the room, the impact of COVID-19 on the legal industry. So this is practically all news today. The upheaval caused by COVID-19 has had an impact on work habits present in the legal sector. The most obvious one is WFH, working from home. We're all dealing with this still right now, at least at Thomson Reuters, but it has also had other impact on the corporate law departments. And as you can see, as you can tell from the stats here, it had quite the impact on the workload. According to a survey that was conducted by our top leadership branch called Acritas in the State of Business Legal Services for 2021, 58% of the counsels that were surveyed said that they experienced an increased workload. And then when it comes to forecasts in spending for the year ahead, well, this was more of a balanced view depending on the industry that we work in. So 40% said that they were experiencing an increase, and then 30% experienced a decrease. But what really interests us here is the challenge, and the main challenge that's been identified by a great majority of them was the remote in-house teams working effectively and efficiently. So that really brings you to perspective about what corporate client needs, and what corporate client needs is really when you're working from home and everybody's in their own little silos, is maximum efficiency in a dynamic world. Things are changing quite fast these days. So in turn, they really need from their lawyer, from their counsel, fast expert response from a trusted source. There's not much time for hesitation here nowadays, so that's what they really need, and to accompany that, they really need proactive support and obviously risk mitigation. But in turn, corporate counsels also have needs, and when it comes to their work, what corporate counsel needs is really plan from their employer, is really plans for a flexible future. And through that survey, we found out that 21% of counsels want change, specifically towards this situation. So that's a pretty high number. And they want more collaboration across all the businesses in the industry. And they really want to find themselves working for an employer that has strong corporate vision and values. So this is the state of the corporate law department as it stands in COVID. Now let's explore a bit more what the legal workforce wants when it comes to finding an employer. And this comes from another report that was done by the Thomson Reuters Institute in late 2020. And that was a survey of law students that was conducted. And that found out that only 30% said that they would consider a career in-house. So, and just really 11% said they would, it would be their preferred career choice. So the survey really showed that there was a very, that there was very little understanding of what an in-house career entails, with some law school respondents saying that they didn't think they would be qualified for such a job, they didn't have the right experience, and that there wouldn't be a much earning potential variety of work. And so clearly, I think the role of in-house counsel needs to be demystified. And for those of you on the call today, well, that's what we're going to do. And so this is why this is such a topic is a hot topic, and we should appreciate Megan telling us more about it coming shortly. But one more thing about this this survey. What about lawyers? So many law departments recruit their talent directly from law firms, and we've seen a shift there too. So something, you know, those numbers are from law students, but when it comes to lawyers working from at law firms, what we've seen is that almost 80% of the lawyers have said that they want to maintain the changes that they've experienced during remote working, according to another survey, and further to that, 20% said they would leave their current firm if it won't accommodate greater flexibility. So I would say that's a game changer. That's also something that's affecting the legal workforce numbers. One last thing that I wanted to present to you before we go on and have ask all the questions we need to know to Megan is what corporate law department wants. So briefly, you may want to do the transition over to a corporate law department, but you should know that 81% of law departments hirings were for legal operations role in 2020. So that's quite a substantial jump because the year before it was 57%. So, but in both of these years, people on this call should know that this is kind of the way of the future. And if they want one skill that they want to, for them to get the job that they are possibly targeting in a law department, having that experience or having that ability of dealing with legal operations is really something that they should reflect on. So with this said, let's jump over to the core of the conversation. I will stop sharing my screen. And we have Megan here. And oops, sorry. And so let's jump drive in. So Megan, I want to know more about you. You have a unique expert perspective on our topic. You started your career in a large law firm, made a transition to a corporate counsel later on. Tell us a bit more about you and your practice over the year. What originally motivated you to make the move from Osler to Reuters back in the days?
Yeah, thanks, Max. Thanks for joining us today. So yeah, a bit more about myself. As Max indicated, I started my career in private practice at Osler's in their franchise and distribution group. And I made the move to Inhouse fairly early on in my career after about only 4 years in private practice. I'd been fortunate enough to have a taste of life in-house service secondment while I was at Osler to a large sort of Canadian company. I was there for almost 6 months and really enjoyed my time. The franchise group at Osler was also unique in that it was quite small, which really allowed more opportunities for junior lawyers such as myself to work more directly with clients and even get more involved in some of their day-to-day business. And I really started to really enjoy that part of the job, so some of the business side. So and also focusing on sort of one client. And so I think early on I started realizing that I was looking towards moving towards the in-house path. And similar to what some of the survey results Max shared, it's not necessarily what I thought when I was leaving law school and being called to bar. I think I was probably one of those minor 30% thinking it'd be a possibility. But once I got into it, realized that was sort of the route I wanted to take. And I was fortunate enough to find a position at Reuters, doing really similar work to what I had done at the firm, and quickly was able to get engaged with the business and multiple business units there, which allowed me to really grow my career. And then, as Max indicated, I later moved to Starbucks, where I was allowed to get sort of further involved with senior management side and the strategic planning for business. But it also gave me sort of insight into working with a Canadian subsidiary as opposed to at Reuters, where you're at the Canadian-based company. So really had sort of a big mix of involvement with businesses of all sorts. And I think it really benefited from the knowledge gained by being at a firm to start with, but really absolutely found my home working in-house.
So people, unique experience. I forgot to mention, but feel free to ask questions in the chat. Megan and I, or Megan, will be happy to answer any questions that you may have. While you think about your questions, I do have many to come to Megan for your benefit. So let's really dive in and explore the key differences between law firm and in-house practice. So Megan, can you expand on where they are broadly and give us a sense of where lies the largest gap to fill for lawyers transitioning?
Yes, I mean, I think ultimately the role you play both in private practice and in-house is to obviously advise clients on various legal issues, but there clearly are key differences. To begin with, you move in-house from private practice and you go from juggling multiple clients working in various industries to really having one primary client. I mean, there might be subsidiaries or affiliates, but really you have one client that you serve. In addition, you're not, as opposed to being at a firm where you're engaged because there's a particular issue or, new transaction that needs to get completed, you really are, as in-house counsel, the go-to for all things legal. You can get really immersed in the business, and even depending on the size of the company, in some cases, in-house counsel actually find themselves sitting within a particular business unit as opposed to, working with a team of lawyers directly. And as you get more senior on, as you move in, in-house role, you also get more exposure to management and board of directors, and that really gives you the opportunity to start advising on strategic planning and decision making. And that's really experience you don't often get sort of at a firm, especially as a junior lawyer. So the in-house role, really, as opposed to being a firm, is a dual role where you take on the role of both, as I say, lawyer and business partner. And the gap to fill is really learning how to become that generalist at the same time as being a strategic partner. So, depending on the size of the legal department, it's unlikely to focus on one specific area of law. And when I went to Reuters, I was focused on distribution, but as that role in serving that team, I still had to be able to advise on marketing, on supply chain, procurement, technology, even some basic employment law. So it really is a matter of learning how to become that generalist to really serve the client as best as you can. Another big difference, I think, highlighting is when you move in-house, you move from being sort of a profit center to being a cost center. You don't have to bill your time, that's great, but you do have to find ways to do a lot more with a lot less. You find yourself, in a position where you have to learn about a new business, a new industry, working in a fast-paced environment with limited resources. At a firm, particularly as a junior lawyer, you have senior partners or senior associates who are looking at what you do. So if you're drafting a new agreement or drafting a memo, you have that sort of safe, stopgap of knowing somebody will review it before it goes to the client. Whereas when you're in-house, oftentimes you're asked for your opinion on the spot at a meeting, or clients show up at your door, or I guess today's time looking, through team meetings or so on, really looking for sort of that instant advice. You also don't have the precedence and the training and resources that you might have at a firm. Most firms have large document retention systems, document management systems, I should say, where you have a whole series of precedent agreements, precedent memos, things you can draw on. When you go in-house, that really is not usually the case. And so you're looking at having to draft precedents from scratch and doing a lot of the work on your own in new areas of law at a rapid pace. So it's quite different and definitely challenges to overcome, but huge rewards as well.
Yeah, thank you for the answer, and I really want to circle back to what you said because this is really resonating with what I've heard also with a lot of my friends who made the move from working in the law firm and onto a corporate counsel role. What they really found out, at the start of their role was that they really enjoy being immersed in the business. And for them, it was, something quite new, less clerical, they would say, and something that they really felt part of the whole entity and the organization. So for them, that was really a strong point that comforted them in making that move. And then quite more quickly than they thought, the strategic planning and decision making, the fact that they were being included in that, even though they didn't have the greatest experience in the world, that really also was a point that was a strong point for them to comfort them in their decision. But it's one thing to start in the role. It's another thing to really establish the credibility that you want to have within the company. So here's the next question to you, Megan. So when starting a new role in-house, what is the first thing lawyers should do to tame the workload, tame that beast coming at them, and how can they do it in an efficient manner?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing is to really get to know the client, get to know the company, the business, the industry they work in. And there's a number of ways to do that. What I've sort of found worked, at least for me, was to really go to as many meetings as you can and get to know your business colleagues, your business clients. I found, attending meetings, whether it's sort of a monthly strategy meeting or just a regular recurring update, for marketing or sales team, it allows the business clients to get to know you, get to know who you are, and really allows you to get a better understanding of the business and hear directly from them what some of the challenges, issues they're facing. And so, lets you really get a sort of a bit of a glance into what might come later on. It also really, again, it lets you, gives you ways to learn and to help educate them as well on what your role is. For example, if you're in a marketing meeting and you're allowed to, to listen in, you can alert the business early on to potential legal issues that might slow things down later on. And it also really allows you to understand where they're trying to take the business. And that's a really great way to sort of just to get to know exactly what's happening in each department. Again, this approach might not work if you're in a large in-house team. In that case, you sort of work with your boss or your peers to sort of get their understanding of what's happening around the business, and ask to sort of just to shadow them as much as you can when you're starting out in a new industry. I think it's also really important to make sure you get up to speed on all the internal processes and policies, knowing who the key decision makers are, what rules are in place to make sure, who can sign off on what contract. Every company is quite different. So whether you're first moving in-house or changing jobs, I think it's really important to spend the time when you first start to go through those policy manuals and get up to speed. And finally, depending on the nature of the business, do what you can to experience the products and services that your company offers. So at Reuters, for example, when we were starting up a bank, I was working with auditing customer service calls to make sure that we are following compliance rules and staying in line with the pretty strict regulatory requirements. And from there, I could help, work with our ops team to modify our contract to make sure we were fully in compliance. And certainly more fun at Starbucks. All employees are encouraged to actually spend time in stores working. And I spent a few weeks, actually almost a month, before I even set foot in the office, working as a barista in stores. I struggled making the fancy drinks. I became a pro at the drive-through window, but really it allowed me to see the challenges and issues faced by both customers and the employees. So when I got into the role, I could actually really have, better contributions, understanding what the strategic plan was and tailor my advice to some of the real-time struggles they see in the stores.
So I love it. I'm learning something new. Megan, lawyer barista. For those, in the attendance, I would love to serve coffee in the room. Maybe in the in the coming months, we'll be able to have you all united in the same room and serve coffee or something else, drinks or whatever. But circling back to your point, no, you're making fantastic points here. And I think establishing a kind of credibility, and I have to show my colors here. I'm a practical law fan and enthusiast, and I think practical law really could help a lawyer who is quite busy learning the business and establishing a credibility, gain some time and efficiently, providing the legal know-how, and that gives that counsel a better starting point. So I find, especially when starting a new role, it's critical to have every document that you're going to be rely on maintained and up to date, and that's really what practical law does. So you don't waste time on this aspect of and get kind of overwhelmed with dealing with this aspect of the job, and can really focus on the higher value work. So that's my two colors. But back to you, Megan. I have another question for you, and it's about internal clients. So when you're starting a new role, you want to. I've read your document, your practical tips, and it's about setting and meeting expectations with the internal clients. So being in touch with multiple corporate counsels, one aspect of their work is the same for all. It's really easy to get buried under demands, and they're all facing an increasing workload, as we've seen. in the survey. So how can they be efficient? What can they do to face the music when it comes to meeting expectations and setting them?
Yeah, so again, it goes back to building relationships and making sure that when you're starting in a new company, you really understand the company's mission and values, so that the advice you give is really tied to that as well, and make sure you keep that in mind as you're working to provide advice and if you're lucky enough to help develop strategic plans. But what's really most important, I think, is learning about the company's risk profile, because that ultimately affects the advice you're going to give. Each company has a different level of risk in their daily operations, depending on, who the management people are, what the market share is, what their revenue is, litigation history, and so on. And so you really have to understand what that profile is, so that when you're providing advice, you can, strike the right balance between supporting corporate growth and then protecting both the company and the executives within that, so nobody ends up in jail. And to dig into that profile, I think it's important to get feedback from your clients, really, focus your conversations with the board and senior management to understand how they prioritize risk, and also review sort of historical documents, for example, contracts or past litigation or memos from outside counsel, to really, look at the patterns and help sort of, again, uncover that risk profile so you can bring it into your day-to-day advice. I think it's also really important to make sure your clients understand what your role is as in-house counsel. Again, you have that dual role on with the hat of sort of business partner and lawyer, but I think it's important ensuring that they understand that ultimately your first role is as the lawyer, and you have to make sure to always protect privilege, avoid conflicts, ensure that all the company procedures are followed. So it's important to remember always and make it clear to your clients that that is your first role. I find training is a really great way to do that, whether it's holding informal lunch and learns quarterly, or asking for 5 to 10 minutes at the end of one of those monthly meetings I was talking about earlier, to sort of provide updates on changes to law, or just to provide reminders on things like privilege and conflicts of interest and so on. And again, it's also making sure that when you wear that dual role, it's really clear when you're giving business advice versus, when you're not. So, I love marketing and Starbucks. If I hear a new promotion, and if I were to give any negative feedback, I have to make sure it's because I think, hey, that's not going to sell in the market, as opposed to there's a legal risk. So I think it's just making sure you're always really open with communication and making sure your business clients know what the role you're playing is at that time.
Well, you're making great points here, Megan. I think it all ties back to what you're saying, understanding your client and building a relationship. But on the other hand, like making sure that business clients understand the nature of your role. So yeah, and that's a fantastic point. But at the core of this, and I find, and you've talked about this in your practical tips documents, it's really about communication, and you extend yourself on using effective communication strategies. And I do have a question on this, because there is some shared perception among corporate clients that legal departments are kind of located in their own ivory tower, inaccessible and a bit self-centered. When counsel reach out, it's only to speak that incomprehensible legalese. So, I mean, knowing communication is really at the heart of building rapport with stakeholders and in the company. How can a new counsel effectively break the silos and do his work without being a victim of such perceptions?
Yeah, I think it's really important, again, to use plain language, as you say, avoid that legalese, use plain language and tailor the communication you're giving to your audience. I mean, oftentimes when businesses are looking for external counsel for, formal legal opinions, they're expecting to get a long document with a lot of legalese, then usually turn it to their inside counsel or in-house counsel to say, put this in plain language. What does this mean? What can and can't I do? I mean, that really is what the bottom line is. The business partners want to know what you can and can't do. So again, yeah, so use plain language and tailor communication to who you're talking to. It's also setting really clear expectations and targets for the work you're getting done, and not being intimidated or afraid to acknowledge where you need more time. As I said earlier, there's times as in-house where you're called on in a meeting or, on the fly to give advice. And if it's something, if I were being called on, for example, for a tax issue, I'd say, okay, that's sort of outside my expertise. give me some time, I can dig into this, let me get back to you, and just really being clear to make sure that you always sort of set the expectations properly and don't sort of overstep where you're at. Not off a budget for external counsel, but some matters just can't be dealt with internally. And I think it's just setting those expectations with your clients and making sure they understand sort of, again, in plain language, real time, what they can and can't do, and go from there.
Yeah, people like it straight. Give them,
yes.
Don't put in 1,000 words what you can in a few words, for sure. That's the business way. And also that's part of developing, yourself as and positioning yourself as a trusted legal advisor and valued business partner. It's something also you've talked about in your document. So when we think about the role of legal counsel in business, we often think about competing pressures of protecting the company's core interests, bringing awareness of potential risk, but you don't want to be a drag on its growth and roadmap to success, right? Can you offer us tips on strategies on how to manage this delicate balance?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, it goes back to knowing your client, understanding the tolerance for risk, and then using that knowledge to avoid being sort of a stopgap to achieving the corporate goals. You don't ever want to be the one saying no. So it's this delicate balance, as you say, of finding a solution that keeps the company out of legal trouble, but still achieving the company goals. So some tips, get involved early on so you can spot issues and create awareness before too much time and money has been spent. Again, attending some of those meetings that might seem unnecessary at first, that's a great way to do that, to really, be able to sort of issue spot early. Always with business merits of a decision against the legal risk. You want to make sure that the key players, management, and sometimes even the board are aware of what the risks are, and they really truly understand how the business is affected. So when ultimately the decision that's going to be made, if there is risk of, be it regulatory fines or reputational damage, you really made it clear, and again, in plain language and easy to understand terms, what those risks are and what the effect on the business will be. Another tip I think would be to look for alternative solutions. So again, rather than simply say no, I used to always try to brainstorm with the business team I was working with to look at other options that might help to reduce the risk and at least make me as a lawyer feel more comfortable with, providing us my opinion. And if I truly did say no, my internal clients who got to know me and had confidence that I had considered the alternatives really took that as no and didn't push back as much as they might if you were always sort of saying, taking that firm line. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the tip would be to clearly communicate timelines and make sure to keep communication open, particularly if things change. They want to make sure that you are that trusted advisor. And so as long as your timelines are always open and honest, I don't think you won't have issues going forward. Another thing would be to be a team leader. So in-house counsel often work in cross-functional groups, working with teams like sales, public relations, strategy, marketing, R&D. And so I think as an in-house counsel, you play a great role by sort of bridging the communication between all those groups and helping to bring them all together and help, achieving consensus. A final tip I'd say would just go above and beyond what people think might be a typical lawyer role and just be that team player who's helping to tackle issues, even non-legal issues. And ultimately, I think some of these tips might help you to really succeed in-house, to be more than just a lawyer, but to be that problem solver and trusted business partner, key partner to the organization.
All right, thanks, Megan. I love that tip about involving the client in evaluating the coming risks. It sounds a lot to me like a parenting strategy as well.
Yes.
So who knows? That applies to many areas in life.
Yes.
All right. So this is already the end of it. I think I want to thank you again, Megan, for accepting to do this, sharing your experience. I think it was very valuable for people here. And this is only the beginning. We're doing a series of webinars like this. It's a shorter format. We try to keep it at around 30 minutes just for people to get back to work, when we're all busy, right? So we try to put in as much value in the conversation. But of course, we have these great support documents that were sent to you before by email. So feel free to, if you want to know more, if you want to have a reminder, feel free to consult them. And I want to thank the attendees for coming and participating here. And I wish you a bit rest of the day. For those of you who are in Ontario, a very nice long weekend.
Thanks, Max.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.